Hi, I'm Jennifer, and this is My True Ghost Stories, where I share stories of my supernatural adventures as a spiritual medium, helping trapped spirits to cross over and more. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 10 of My True Ghost Stories. Our stories today are about messages that come from spirits interfering with electronics. And let's begin. The name of this story is I Got a Guy. This story takes place in that church in my neighborhood that I've been talking about, and it centers around their landline phone system. They were having lots of problems with it. Calls would constantly disconnect, the extensions were going to the wrong person, the whole system would shut down completely on a regular basis, callers would get a busy signal, stuff like that. And they had a technician coming regularly to fix and refix the lines, and all would be good for a day or two, and then the problems would start again. Finally, there came a point where it seemed that the problem, whatever it was, had finally been resolved. And a whole week went by without a single glitch, and all of a sudden, the whole system shut down again. They called the technician in yet again, and he came in, checked everything. He checked the phone lines, the indoor equipment, the outdoor box, the jacks, all of which had been checked and tinkered with repeatedly, and this time he found nothing wrong, nothing he could even tinker with. Now, this was the same technician who had been there at least once a week, if not more, for some time, and according to what the staff told me, he walked into the office after finding nothing in the phone lines that he could fix, and said in a hesitant voice, I don't know how to say this, and it might sound crazy, but I think something else is going on here. And when they asked him to elaborate, he said, even more hesitantly, like something supernatural. Something or someone is maybe trying to get your attention. And he was basically saying that he didn't know what else to do. And there was some silence while everyone stood around and pondered that. And then my friend, who works at that church and was at this meeting, finally broke the silence and used a common New York City expression. She said, I got a guy. And I, Jennifer, am that guy. I got a guy is used when you know someone with the exact skill set and equipment needed for a particular problem. Like an appliance repairman for your broken dishwasher, or high-velocity water jetting for your clogged drain pipe. And in this case, a spiritual medium to find and clear the supernatural forces that are repeatedly shutting down the phone system. And getting back to the phone technician. This may not have been his first experience with this type of thing, because this is a thing that happens. It's called supernatural electromagnetic interference, which is the side effect of any object or radiation that may be a supernatural entity's presence, which can cause nearby electronics to malfunction. And that's from an article called The Electronics of Paranormal Manifestations by Dr. S.S. Verma, a professor at the Department of Physics at the St. Longawil Institute of Engineering and Technology. The link is in the show notes. And no lie, literally this morning, at the same time that I was reading this very article about supernatural electromagnetic interference for this podcast, my music player started randomly playing this ethereal meditation music in the next room where nobody is. Nobody at all. The song that started playing was called Harmony Unleashed. And I'm going to take that as a message from the universe that this stuff that I'm talking about here is true. I've included the link to the song in the show notes, the song that randomly played. So let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts about this song being played by the universe while I write a story about paranormal manifestations in electronics. And back to our story. After the staff of this church and the frustrated phone repairman heard that there was a guy who might be able to fix this, they were so desperate to get the phones back that they all instantly agreed. Call the guy. Call the guy. So she called me. She explained everything and asked me to please come in and assess this situation. I came in probably the next day, and the staff was excited to meet me, mostly because the phones might finally be fixed, and also because they were probably expecting me to be wearing something like a long purple spangled dress with batwing sleeves, like a medium in a movie. And they may have been disappointed to see me arrive in jeans and a t-shirt because they dissipated pretty quickly after meeting me. Someday, maybe I will buy a purple spangled batwing dress for this work. But it's easier to work in jeans and a t-shirt, so I don't know. After meeting everyone and them disappearing, I began my process. I sat on a couch in the lobby, which was sort of situated in the middle of the building. I closed my eyes, I got into the zone, and I waited for a message. And what came to me pretty quickly was not a voice, but a vision of the storage room downstairs. Now, this is the same storage room with the closed door that I talked about in episode 3. But the room in this vision had what I will call a different vibe than before. And there was a strong message, not in a particular spirit's voice, but in instructions from my guides to go down there. And there was also a vague sense of a former pastor from this church. And the message was that there was a problem in this storage room. I went into the office where my friend was at her desk, and I told her, "There's something up with that storage room downstairs. Can you go down there with me?" Now, as I described in our story from episode 3, this room had a door that used to be open all the time and now remained closed and had been so for maybe a year. We went downstairs and she unlocked the door, opened it up, turned on the light, and what we saw was a room completely filled to the brim with clutter. And this was not what this room used to look like. It had been, in the past, a fairly organized and active storage room with items coming in and out for seasons and occasions, like holiday decorations, party supplies, coffee urns. But 2 things had happened in this past year. This church used to run a mid-sized elementary school a few blocks away, and the school had closed and been taken over by another school, and it looked like everything besides the desks and blackboards from that school had been brought over and dumped into this storage room. Files, decorations, binders, boxes and boxes and boxes of who knows what, labeled with the name of the school and the word miscellaneous on the sides. Piles of old notebooks were pressed up against electrical outlets. Folders bulging with paper were stacked on top of the heating pipes. In other words, an enormous fire hazard. And the second thing that had happened in this church building was that for some reason, they had closed this door. So, out of sight, out of mind, nobody was really aware of what was going on in that room. "Oh my God," my friend yelled when we turned on the lights. "Well, I guess we see what the problem is," I said. Further fire hazards were rapidly revealed as we waded through the room, and I got no more messages from my guides and the spirit of the pastor because this was obviously what we were meant to find. I left. The message had been successfully delivered, and this job did not require an energy clearing by me. It required a clutter clearing by the staff and custodians of this church. I know that they went down there that day and addressed the blatant fire hazards in that room. They were headed down there as I left. And guess what? Those phones began working immediately. It took them a while, but they got rid of all that stuff and eventually renovated the space into 2 smaller rooms that were very, very organized. And I know that because they called me to come by and sort of approve the new storage rooms. Not that storage is my area of expertise, but it was important to them to show me the results of my messages, and I was quite honored to be consulted like that, and they were very proud of their new storage areas. Here's what is quite obvious to me that happened here. Nobody was seeing the terrible fire hazard in this big building because it was hidden away in a forgotten storage room with a closed door. And the guides of the universe, not just my guides, and the spirit of that pastor, they did whatever they had to do to get the attention of the staff and refused to let those phones be fixed until they called in a medium who would get them to open that door and see what was going on. And this, to me, would be a prime example of supernatural electromagnetic interference. And it's also a beautiful reminder that there are forces out there looking out for us and for our safety. And here is another story of supernatural electromagnetic interference. It's a little hard to say. This story takes place in a small theater in New York City during a show, and the show was created by and starred an artist who I have decided not to name because part of the story is personal to her. At the time of this show, I had just begun acknowledging ghosts around me and telling people. And I was a little overexcited, constantly sharing with my friends. There's a man with a briefcase over there. There's a young girl in a pink dress over there. There's a lady in that bedroom across the hall. And it was most likely getting a little tiresome for my friends because that's all I ever talked about. And it was exhausting for me. Although I was no longer expending all my energy ignoring the ghosts, I had at this point not yet learned how to set boundaries with them, so I was constantly engaging with them. I had also not learned any etiquette around delivering messages to people that had not asked for them. Sorry, everybody. So at this point, I was also often giving messages, even to strangers. I didn't know what to do with all of this, and I felt like I had to do something. These days, I pretty much don't see the spirits unless I am working. Sometimes an extraordinarily persistent spirit will get through, or one that really needs my help, and I help them. But this in general is much better now with the boundaries. Better for me, and the people around me that didn't ask for a message. I attended the show in this story with 2 friends, both of who knew about my ghost seeing abilities. They really had no choice but to know because I couldn't stop talking about it. And we were fans of this artist whose show it was, but we did not know what the show was about, as this was opening night. We walked into the theater, and my attention was immediately drawn to the center of the ceiling, midway between the proscenium and the top balcony. And there was a huge ghost of a woman facing horizontally down, and it was as if her back was pressed into the arch. And around her were white flowing garments, and it was like they were billowing all around her, and her arms were outstretched. And the whole vision was beautiful and powerful, and the energy coming from her was strong, and she seemed angry. Not dangerous, just really, really angry. The theater was full of people finding their seats and the excited, echoey chatter that you hear in a theater before a performance. And our seats were in the first balcony, and as the usher was bringing us there, I told my friends, "There's a huge angry woman ghost on the ceiling." And they were not that interested, as this was probably the 5th ghost I had pointed out since we began dinner earlier that evening. So they said things like, "Oh, wow, really? That's nice." And they were probably wanting to say, "Can we talk about something else, please?" We took our seats and we had no time to read the program. But as I was about to tell them more about the angry woman ghost on the ceiling, the house lights went down, the crowd quieted, the curtain went up, and the performers entered the stage. The cast was the woman artist who had created the show and musicians. Besides the performers, their instruments, and some electronic piano keyboards, there were 2 screens on stage, and there were a few computers on small tables. So it was a multimedia event, and knowing this artist, it was going to be really interesting. She addressed the audience, and the show was going to be somewhat autobiographical. Some slides came on, some music played. The musicians moved around the stage to different laptops. They exited and entered, and it was really good so far. And about 20 minutes in, it became obvious that the show was largely about this artist's strained relationship with her mother, who had passed on many years before. My friend tapped me on the arm. "The ghost on the ceiling is her mother." "Yes, that's it," I responded. And I could see, as my friend also probably could, how this particular show could make a mom ghost mad. Soon after my friend and I had that whispered conversation, some weird stuff started to happen on stage. And you could tell that it was not what was supposed to be happening. The slides on the screen were supposed to change, but they didn't, or they went backward. One musician would be playing the keyboard, but no sound was coming out. Microphones were shutting on and off. And although these performers were seasoned professionals, those of us in the audience could tell that things were going wrong up there that the cast couldn't cover up. And then there was a long pause, and the artist announced, "We are having some technical difficulties, and we're going to take a short intermission." The house lights only went halfway up, as this was supposed to be a 1-act show, and the audience stayed seated for the most part, and the chatter stayed on the low side. During this relatively quiet, low-lit break, I realized that this angry mom spirit and her guides wanted to communicate with me. "What's going on?" I asked calmly. I focused on the spirit, and the message was quick and clear, and I knew it was intended for the artist whose show this was. And the message was, she needs to go to the middle of the stage when there is no audience and speak her mother's name so her mother can ascend. Okay, got it, I said quietly. And as I said that, the angry mom spirit diminished down to regular ghost size, which is about the size of a human in my experience, and she came off the ceiling and down into the theater over near the exit, and the overpowering energy also diminished. And the unscheduled intermission ended as the house lights went down. I knew I needed to get that message to the artist, which I figured out a way to do, and it wasn't going to be difficult. I was friends with someone who was a stagehand at this theater, and he was working that night, and we were going to see him briefly after the show. I found a piece of paper in my purse and a pen for when the lights came up again. The show started up, and when the stage lights came on, you could see that there were some minor changes to the set and the positions of the screens, and I guess they had reconfigured and rebooted because the rest of the show had no technical problems at all, and it was amazing. And near the end of the show, there was a line about speaking someone's name for the last time. At the end of the show, as my friends were standing and wildly applauding, I was furiously scribbling out a note on the piece of paper I had found in my purse. And it said, "Dear," I'm not going to say her name, "your mother was at the performance tonight. She needs you to go to the center of the stage when there's no audience and say her name so that she can ascend. Jennifer." And I put my phone number just in case. After the show, we met our stagehand friend in the lobby, and we talked briefly about how great the show was, and I gave him the note, asking him to give it to her. He said he would, that he had met her briefly during soundcheck, and that she seemed like the kind of person who would be open to this kind of thing. My friends and I left the theater and headed out into the night, and I felt great. I knew that this was what I was supposed to do. My job, delivering that message, was done, and I knew that I was not responsible for whatever happened next. I spoke to my friend, the stagehand, the next day, and he told me he had given her the note. It was well received and made sense to her. And I imagine she did what the spirit had asked. I imagine that because my friend said the message was well received, there were no more technical difficulties for the rest of the run, and I received no messages from the ghost of the mom or her guides. This is what I think. I think this spirit appeared at the show partly because she was mad at the content, and also she and her guides appeared at this show because they knew a medium would be there, and that the medium knew someone backstage who could deliver the message. And for some reason, her daughter's saying of her name in the middle of the stage needed to happen for her to cross over. So this was like the spirits in the church in our first story that interfered relentlessly with the phones until everyone stopped to take notice and take specific action. In this theater situation, the spirits interfered relentlessly with the electronics in the show. And although the situation was not dangerous to humans like the fire hazard at the church, it was crucial to this spirit's passing. Have you ever experienced supernatural electromagnetic interference? Let me know in the comments or send me an email. And if you enjoyed this episode, click the share button in your app and send it to a friend, and take a second to review this show to help it grow. And that's all for today. Thank you for listening to today's episode. And if you think your house is haunted, want energy cleared from your space, or need a custom spiritual ritual, I'm here to help. Visit jpclearing.com or email me at jpclearing60@gmail.com. Don't forget to join me here every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time. And that's from an article called The Electronics of Paranormal Manifestations by Dr. S.S. Verma, a professor at the Department of Physics at the St. Longawil Institute of Engineering and Technology.